welcome back to the Circuit Revival, where today we're going to be looking at not one, not two, but three of these Nespresso Aeroccino milk frothers. Basically, I got these from a friend. I went in, told him I was fixing things, told him I liked the Aeroccino, and he proceeded to pull out three of them. So somehow I think he is single-handedly keeping Nespresso's business afloat, but none of them are working. I think I can probably guess it's the thermal fuses in them. I think it's quite a common problem, but I've got all three here, and I've got just a power supply here, but just to prove that's still working, we'll just start off with that as the obvious answer. So I'm going to go into volts AC on this, and I'm going to put my red probe just in the middle here, and then push down on this black skirt on the outside, and then you should be able to see there 243 volts. So the power supply is absolutely fine. We'll put that to the side, and we'll take a look at this. And then just to prove it's not working, if we put this on and then push the button, this should turn red, and absolutely nothing there. So we'll take a look inside it. I think they're quite straightforward to get into, but I think they've got sort of their own screws here. You can see they're sort of like tri-wing, but slightly different. But I've got just a standard tri-wing screwdriver here, and I'm hoping that if I just kind of use that, that should get me into it. So yeah, just being a bit careful. It does slip a bit, but we can undo that there, and that sounds like it's undone. Try this one. And that feels like it's undone as well. Now I don't really know how to get into these. That sounds like it's clicking on something. Kind of presumed they would come straight out. Now does this just pull? Okay, that's very stiff. Let me just have a quick look and see if there's any answers on how to get into this. Yeah, so apparently that should just be those two screws, and it should just then come undone on the edge here, which I think I can see it's starting to loosen. We'll just keep going. Just double check those screws. I think it's just going to require a bit of force. Okay, that's coming now. I think with there is a lot of material come out of this, so I think maybe it overflowed slightly into itself, and I think it should just leverage out. Just going to give this desk a little bit of a clean first. Then we'll just keep pulling it, and it should keep coming. I think it might just be stuck on the button there. Oh, okay, that's come out. I think that was the top of the button there. It's just got a bit caught. And then we're in, so I think that just tucks in there for the switch. And that's what it looks like in the inside, and that obviously just connects to these two terminals just in here. So I believe the thermal fuse is just in this gap here, and I'm guessing that's what's gone on this. So we'll test that first of all. Just try and loop this wire around. This comes out. Loop this one around as well, and then hopefully it should lift out. We might just need to leverage it off a bit. I think these two sides just come out, and then this should just lift out of place. There we go. So we've got a bit of thermal paste on there. I'm guessing help the conductivity, and then our thermal fuse is just here. So we'll see if we try and get this sheath out the way. with enough room to be able to get both ends of the fuse on the multimeter here. And I'll be honest, it doesn't look very healthy to begin with. So there's our thermal fuse, and I think it's supposed to be just white, and that's obviously not. So we can test this with our multimeter again. So what I'll do is I'll get this, we'll put it in continuity mode, which is the mode that beeps when the prongs touch each other and we have a complete circuit, like so, and we should get a reading through this fuse, which we do not, so is evidence that the fuse is gone, and I imagine that is the case with all three of these. So it looks like it's crimped on. No, I don't have any crimps or anything, so we might have to either A, try and solder it on, but then we need to watch out because the temperature that my solder will melt at will be much higher than the temperature of this fuse. So I presumed this was going to be the case. I've already bought some fuses for this just to swap out. I think we should be able to read what that is. So it's 250 volts at what looks like 133 degrees Celsius is the fuse that's in there. So what we'll try and do is see if we can just unwrap the crimp on this, and then see if we can just rewrap the crimp back onto it again. So I'm going to use probably a screwdriver and maybe a pair of pliers to get into this. Got some of that thermal paste on my hands. See if I can get in here. Just try and squeeze my screwdriver in and just unwrap it because it's just wrapped around on itself. So I think this is a common problem with these devices, which is probably good and bad. It seems like it happens a lot, but they're obviously there as a safety feature so that they don't overheat and potentially burn down a house. But I think it's starting to come undone, so I'm just gripping one side with the pliers and then trying to use these wire cutters just to twist it out on itself. Looks like I might end up having to just cut it off and then solder it on instead. Because I'm getting to this point here, there's actually tightness that I'm just put out. Try a bit more with these lines if we can look with it. I'm trying to get a grip on both sides of that, it's not easy. Might have a small pair of pliers, right, no chance. Okay, I think it might be colour slightly, although it's breaking out. I think that's undone, I think I have to just cut through a little bit. But yeah, I think it's split where it's come undone, so might have to try and solder this on instead. Which I'd recommend if you've got the crimps, I'd just crimp it on instead. I think you can buy them, so you could probably cut the ends off with the crimps themselves and then attach it re-on with the new crimp, but I don't have anything here. So I think I'll probably end up trying to solder these back on, but we'll try to get this side off as well. No, I'm not entirely sure I'll be able to get back into this crimp without it breaking, so we'll try solder it on instead. As I said, it's not going to be the easiest thing, but I'm just going to strip back this wire just a touch, just give myself a bit more to solder onto. And then what I'll probably use is something like my pliers as like a heat sink, so that where I try and solder on, that temperature is not going straight into the fuse and will blow it. Okay, there we go, so it's that exposed again. We'll get our fuse. I've got a 250 volt 133 degrees Celsius fuse here, but I say best plan would probably be to try and get it so that you redo the crimps, but I think I might struggle with that. So what I'll do is probably measure it up. So that one end looks the same. I think I'm just going to trim this end down a bit so it's a bit closer to the same length, which that's a lot better. So I'm going to add some solder to these ends, and then I'm going to probably just rest my pliers on top of this so that they work as a bit like a heat sink, especially if maybe it's clamped in there like so. Then hopefully the heat will come up through the pliers rather than into the fuse itself. So I'll turn my soldering iron on. Okay, so that's all heated up there. and we'll start with just trying to get this wire here tinned. So I'll get some solder on my iron, and I'm just going to try and flood this with solder. Try and make it as easy and quick as I can, because I don't want this soldering iron on the fuse for any longer than I need to. Okay, so that's nicely covered, and as I say, I'm going to clamp this in the pliers here, and then I'm going to try and attach it on. Might start with the other side just because it's possibly a bit easier for the fact I'm right-handed. Go into the pliers, get our soldering iron, so there's a little bit of solder on the end of that fuse there. I'm going to come in with the wire, like it quite wants to attach. Okay, we might not be able to solder it on. It doesn't look like it wants to attach that way, so we might need to try and see if we can get these clamps off and then clamp it back on again. We'll just double check that fuse is still okay. Yeah, fuse is still good. Try and see if I can get this open then. And then looks like, yeah, we'll probably have to still try and reuse this crimp. If not, I'll see if there's anything I've got around here that could work as a crimp instead. It feels like it's just breaking, if I'm being honest. I don't really think these crimps were designed to be reused. No, that's just breaking. Have a think and see if there's anything else I can do to get this to work. Just see if this fuse will actually take any solder. See whether adding flux to this will make any difference. Okay, there's a bit of solder on there now. See if we can come in with this wire and get it attached. Okay, just try and get the solder on the wire molten first and see if we can then get it to attach. Okay, that's one side on. Let's double check our fuse is still good. Yep, fuse is still good. We'll do the same with the other side then. So I'll add a bit of flux to the end. Using our pliers. On the fuse itself. So it looks like you really have to flood it to get it to attach. And there we have it. There's some on there again. Let's position this again. What I might try is I'm going to try bringing my Omni vise here, clamp the fuse in there, because it should hopefully act a bit like a heatsink and should hold it in place a bit better, which will allow me to position this wire a bit easier rather than trying to struggle fighting against it. Okay, that's attached. I think I might just try and add a bit more solder to it. Without it coming off. Okay, I think we're attached again. undo the clamp, and we'll get our meter, just double check that fuse, and that's still all good. What we can do is pull this cover back round. Okay, it feels like maybe slightly a bigger profile to this fuse, so this cover might get a bit difficult to get over. Okay, it's quite one to cover the actual fuse itself. See if I can sort of force it along. Okay, so the tube that's on it already isn't going to come over it. So what I've got is some bits of heat shrink here, and I'm just going to try and get them over the top of this, and I'll just use heat shrink instead. And I'll just be a bit careful with the temperature on it, because obviously it will blow at 133 degrees, but I'm sure we can get this covered and not really have an issue. So we can go that on there. If we slide this up here, we should be able to cover all of that. So yeah, I reckon if we use 2 of these, that'll be enough. One on that side, and then we can have this one on that side there. So I'll slide these back over, and I'll just reattach that on, and then we'll use the heat shrink instead. As I say, ideally if you've got crimps, use those, because you then don't run the risk of blowing the fuse. And then I'll just come back in with my soldering iron to reattach this back on. Yep, still good. And then we'll slide this heat shrink back over the top. And then I'll take my hot air station and I'll just set the temperature to the lowest it will go, which is 100 degrees. Not as tight as it could be, but it's still on there. So I'll bring this back up, we'll pin the fuse back in this gap, which looks like it has just a little rubber mounting rest there. So that'll go in there, and then these wires came and were looped around here. We'll do the same on this side. That's all back in place, so we can then take the mount from the outside again, and you should probably, I imagine, replace the thermal paste on this. So I will do that now. I've just got some MX4 here, so I'll use a little bit of IPA to clean up what's on it already, and then we'll just put some fresh MX4 on it. Still quite wet, no, I'm replacing it. So what I use is just 99.9% IPA bottle. Just clean it off the other side. Get the MX4. Still a there. And then we'll reseat this back on, making sure the end there goes into that gap. As you can hear, possibly outside, it is very windy here in the UK at the moment. Okay, and I think that's all back in place, so we can get this together and test it out. Whilst I'm here, I'm just going to clean around the edge of this slightly as well, because it's quite dirty. Just press fit this back in, just to make sure the button goes back in that kind of plastic section there. Yeah, just try and see if I can get that little button out, because it's blocking the way of being able to get the body back in. Okay, so what I've done is I've just pushed it back in on itself all the way, and then hopefully I should be able to then reapply it by just pushing it back in once it's together, which will also give me an opportunity to clean up the section here that's also quite dirty. Okay, there we go. So we'll then put this back in place. That's locked in place, and then hopefully we just need to line this little section up, and then this should just push in place. And we've got a good click. So I'll tighten the screws back up. And that one's tight. And then we'll give it a test. I'm going to have to be really quick with this because I can blow the fuse again by doing it without anything in it. So we'll put it in the base, and yeah, so I'm not sure if you saw the red light there. Perfect. We'll give that a proper test afterwards with the rest of them, but we'll then just repeat the process with the other ones. So I'll probably fast forward through most of this as we've already seen it, but we'll get this one open and double check this one. Okay, this one came out a bit easier. Yep, so that's another dead fuse. So now we know we can't really get these off. What I'll probably do is just cut this off this time. Move this. Break this one quickly. Gotcha. Strip the wire again. There we go. We'll just strip the wire. Okay, we've got our fuse again. I'm just going to cut it down on the long end a bit. We'll place it in our clamp. Put the flux tube in. Right, this over the end of the fuse. And we'll in, okay, come on. Good connection there. Twist this around, do the same again. Another good connection. Some of you would have spotted the mistake I've made already. Forgot to add the heat shrink, didn't I? Yep. We'll just do our heat shrink. That's our heat shrink done. Quite how it was before, but we'll tuck it in place there. We'll do the same again with the base. We'll just remove the old thermal paste. To be honest, this one's not too bad, it's still quite wet. I'll do the same again, so just zoom out so you can see. So all I'm going to do is just push the button in on itself, just adding a bit of pressure, then pop inside, can drop it out, and then it's all good for putting the body back in. So we can then just add this back in. So then all we need to do is just line up the Nespresso sign on the front just with the hole, and then just push it all the way down until it's in. We'll then get our button again, which I'll just give a little once over, and then we just make sure it's aligned and then push it all the way down. And there's our good click. We'll just give this a quick test as well to make sure we see the red light. Yep, red light on that one too. Move on to the final one. And that came out way easier, so someone's definitely been in this one before. So I wonder if this one will have a different fault than if someone's already been in it. So we'll just test this one. And no, once again, dead fuse. So we'll do exactly the same again. Take this tube off. Just a little wire. There we go. Same on this side. 10 these ends. One in. Go in. Fuse. And now. Okay. Good luck. There we go, that's in. Coming right in. One side done. The other side done. Can't believe I forgot the heat shrink again. Heat shrink on again. Shall we touch it? Take touch again. Double check our fuse. Yep. Still on heat shrink. Cable's back in place. Just clean up the thermal paste. So this one is a slightly older model because it's got the older twisty thing, and the board looks a bit different. The newer models, as we see, have this sort of like ring around it. But they're completely interchangeable, so I suppose if you had this and then wanted, you could just buy a new twisty bit. Just put this back in. That's going to be the same again, so we can just line up the Nespresso logo with the front, make sure we've got our tap over the top of the switch. And then just keep on out. Button in place. Good, tighten up. Give a quick test again, see if we get that red light. Yeah, red light on there. So what I'll do is I'll move over to a different room, I'll add some liquid into these so they don't overheat, and then we'll just see them all working. Okay, here I am in the kitchen with all three set up. We're going to give them a test and hopefully each of them works still. So we still red light, red light, red light, and there we have it. I'll just fast forward through this because they should get warm. Okay, so all three have finished there, and I can see the steam. I don't know if it translates in the video, but that's great. The one thing we'll probably notice is the old style spinner definitely doesn't work as frothy, but definitely to heat up quicker. But that's 3 more products saved from the bin. We'll see you in the next one.